Alright, we did Duel Monsters and GX, it's now time to move on to 5Ds, this time with an actual top 10 list of my favorite duels. Basically memorable scenes, the interactions with each other, and sometimes the stakes. And since 5Ds have something like team dueling in the WRGP arc, I'm gonna count it as one big team matchup against another team. Because due to its rulings, the team doesn't lose until all three members are knocked out, and when one player is knocked out, the next one goes in facing the current opponent with the current life points and field that they have. And I'm gonna say this right now, Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds is not my top series. That will go to Yu-Gi-Oh! Sexal, and the main reason is because everyone gets their development in the first season, but once one hits the second season, it just goes out of nowhere. But I still like Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds overall. But other than that, no more wasting time, and let's begin. Number 10. Team 5Ds versus Team Unicorn. First of all, this felt like a slice of life duel, which is something I enjoy for one. And two, there were quite some unexpected results. I did not expect Jack Atlas to lose to the first wheeler. That took me by surprise. And then it goes on to the next player, Aki, where she clearly had the hand advantage along with the life point advantage. She still lost, although she also is the one who summoned Stardust Dragon in a duel. Along with her Black Rose Dragon the same turn, I was expecting her to turn it around. And then we go to Yusei, the last runner in their team, against all three opponents of Team Unicorn. But of course, Yusei, like in protagonist traditions, they go overpowered, they defeat the first two combatants, but not before Andor ships some of his life points away, and Brio doing deck destruction on Yusei, causing him to nearly deck out. And during the battle against his final opponent, Jean, I like the amount of back row destruction cards he has. Yusei summoning Dragon Knight Draco Equus, which I really wish he summoned more, especially against the Machine Emperors, because it's a fusion monster and the Machine Emperors are anti-synchros. And then during his opponent's turn, while he has no more cards to draw, all Jean needs to do is end his turn and Team Unicorn wins. Jean decides to attack anyway to give one final attack as the pride of Team Unicorn, but then Yusei with his very last card in his hand, Stronghold Guardian, gives extra defense to his monster and thus overpowering his opponent's attack and finishing off his opponent. Yeah, so overall quite surprising outcomes, and Team 5Ds could have lost the duel. It was just by sheer luck that Team 5Ds actually won. And also I kinda like the three unicorns. Number 9. Yusei vs Aki. First off, this is actually the first time we've seen a female character that actually needs a sign of development in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise, at its time anyway, and the amount of times that Yusei tries to help Aki to try to control her psychic powers and to try to help her in general was just great, showing that Yusei desperately tries to care about everyone around him, even if they are his enemies. This was also the first time he actually summoned Stardust Dragon in a duel, not the first time he used it, it's the first time he summoned it in the show. Especially against the third Signer Dragon that revealed itself, Black Rose Dragon, and the shenanigans of it being special summoned to nuke the field, because anime effect at the time was every time it was special summoned you can nuke the field, and of course Stardust Dragon is a good counter to it because it negates any destruction effects. And I always liked the idea of the mask breaking, always symbolizing the true person inside the mask. So yeah, so overall, nice establishment of Aki, who could also be considered the main female rival. It's just too bad what Season 2 did to her though. Number 8. Aporia vs Zone. First off, I always like villain versus villain matchups, and this is actually one of the main reasons why I like this duel. It's also the first time we've seen Zone duel as well, which was another thing to look forward to of course. And one of my main reasons why I like this duel was Aporia. Aporia reminding Zone that he wanted Team 5Ds to get stronger so he could change that, so that Destructive Future could have changed. And he was also doing it for Team 5Ds, showing them the hope that they have given him, despite that damaged body he got. And then to the duel itself, I like this part of Zone's playstyle of activating trap cards from his hand. Those are quite unique in the game by the way. And then he summoned the very first Temporal Machine God, which was a level 10 with 0 attack by the way, and normally you would think it was his main ace monster because of those type of stats, but nope, it's not. And of course level 10 with 0 attack would of course have some sort of insane effect, in this case returning all his opponent's monsters back to the deck and dealing 500 damage for each one, because the Machine Emperors count as multiple parts. And then when it went to Aporia's turn, he drew the card that he needed, and then does a strategy where he decks himself out until he has 0, and then plays Afterglow, so during the next turn, when he draws the card, it OTKs his opponent, while leaving his field wide open. And then to Zone's next turn, when his Temporal Machine God returns back to his deck, he summoned a second one, Lazion, with 0 attack, and even though he could just summon a 500 attack 1 monster and win the game, he chooses to summon that instead because he wants to see if Aporia can bring out Hope, because Lazion's effect is shuffling your opponent's graveyard back to the deck, and when your opponent draws a card, they take 1000 damage. And considering that Aporia decked himself out just to put Afterglow as his only card left, yeah, that would be a 1 out of 33 chance of drawing that exact card, which of course he doesn't and loses the game. So overall, Aporia and the Temporal Machine Gods. Number 7. Yusei vs Kiru, first match. First off, Kiru is the first Dark Signer to actually show up, and this was also the time where Yusei showed some vulnerability because he just saw a supposedly dead friend just suddenly alive. And Kiru obviously has some reason to have revenge on Yusei, so that of course brings more tension. I love the shenanigans with 100-Eye Dragon, and even when Yusei tried to turn it around with Stardust Dragon, Kiru turns it around by summoning his Earthbound Immortal, the first one that actually showed up in the series. And of course I like their designs, although too bad they just don't have very good effects. And even with Yusei having some protection in the back row, he can't activate them, thus causing him to quote-unquote lose the duel. Because technically he would have actually lost the duel, but his runner got destroyed beforehand, thus making the duel with no result. Although it makes sense in this case because Yusei is going to die if he does actually officially lose the duel. Which I really wish Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains could have done this with Playmaker. And I also like the fact that a protagonist loses the duel because I always don't like seeing unstoppable protagonists. So yeah, overall the character interactions were good, setting up a rematch of course because Yusei lost the first one. And that's another one, Yusei lost this duel. And I also like the Infernity archetype. Number 6. Team 5D's versus Team Ragnarok. First off, there was already tension between Jack and Dragon as it is, so having them to be the first runners was definitely a smart move, because at least that they both start out fresh and they end the duel fresh. And one of the things I liked is that both players had the very same cards as their very first duel, so of course they both make the same plays until Dragon summons Thor, and then during the next turn, Jack summons Red Nova Dragon for the first time in public. And I really like the matchup, a god versus the devil with godlike powers. And in all those counters that Dragon put on place on Red Nova Dragon, causing Jack to need to play Burning Reborn to turn things around and finish off Dragon, thus settling the score between both players. And then the end phase effect, which I did not expect with the Nordic gods at the time, was that they could special summon themselves at the end phase. Which of course we go to the next runner, Brave, which of course Brave just instantly wins. And then it goes to Brave versus Crow, where Brave already has his Nordic god Thor on the field. And I really like the dynamic between the two. Thinking about the family that they have, and when Brave summoned Loki, causing Crow to nearly lose the duel, with 50 life points, even with a good trap to banish the Nordic gods because Nordic gods active in the graveyard. Brave of course negates it, and then during the next turn where Crow just sets 2 cards face down, Brave was tricked that Crow was actually saving those cards for Yusei, in which he plays the true value of the trap card Blackwing from the graveyard, dealing damage to his opponent equal to one of the monster's attack points on the field, and that would actually win him the game, although Brave has one last trick on his sleeve causing a tie, which I didn't expect by the way, which of course both teams are in their last runner, which Herald has the advantage with already 2 Nordic gods on the field, and even with Yusei playing defensive, that doesn't work because Herald just summons Odin, which has the effect to make all his monsters unaffected by his opponent's card effects. Which of course in Yusei's next turn he summons Majestic Star Dragon, and Herald, seeing through Yusei's strategies with his traps, causes the strategy to put on hold, which of course Yusei can't really do much, and then when Herald finally figured out a way to go through Majestic Star Dragon's ability, By forcing it to activate, he placed Galad Horde in the graveyard, which has the effect by the second end phase when there's 2 counters on it. You can banish all monsters on your field and then deal damage to your opponent equal to the attack points of the banished monsters, which is essentially a ticking time clock. And of course, Nordic Gods Revive because they have that ability, and also the combo that Herald played, where he summons monsters to his opponent's side of the field where Yeomangar will deal 3000 points of damage to the player if the battle positions has been switched, and then he plays Fenrir in his opponent's side, causing all monsters to have to switch battle positions during the battle phase, meaning Yusei has to come up with a way to clear that combo. And of course, what I liked is that Yusei used those monsters to his advantage by using them as cost and summoning Shooting Star Dragon, using Fenrir for extra power, and almost winning that turn if he got one more tuner. And then with Herald's next turn, he plays Odin's Eye again, which Yusei turns it around with his Trick Mirror to replicate Odin's Eye effect and negating it on his opponent. And then using Shooting Star Dragon's negate attack effect to combo it with Zero Force, giving his opponent's monsters 0 attack. Which of course, Galad Horde already has 2 counters, so during the end phase he banished all his monsters and deal damage to his opponent equal to their attack, but considering that they all have 0 attack, Yusei has 0 damage, and then of course, Shooting Star comes back and wins the game. So yeah, a lot of memorable moments, and they actually didn't even feel super long, and in fact I also like the design of the Nordic gods. It's just too bad it's a pretty shitty archetype. And also the fact that the evolved Signer Dragon with godlike powers also fought against them. Number 5. Ruka and Jack versus Aporia. It's nice to see other characters other than Yusei, Jack, and Crow get some shine. And I really like Aporia's new Machine Emperor cards, and not just the regular Machine Emperors. And of course the stakes will be high in this duel because whoever loses the duel will pretty much die. In which Ruka keeps taking a bunch of risks, causing himself to take damage while protecting his sister, causing him to eventually have 0 life points, and his sister Ruka to have a heart attack, decreasing her life points slowly to 0 as he gets revived back to life through one of his Matronics effects, along with the Jesus Dragon power, which finally made him a signer. Unfortunately, it's the 6th one, even though he should have been the 5th one originally, because all those hints from like 100 episodes ago with Power Tool Dragon. So finally, we see the actual 5th signer dragon, Lifestream Dragon, which I really wish was the actual cover card for Extreme Victory, which of course through its effect negates any effect damage and heals the heroes. I also like the Machine Emperor Dragon asterisks and the teamwork of all 3 characters for Jack to deliver the final blow. Which Jack deserves, by the way, because he needs to deliver a final blow against a major antagonist. And Jack reaching out to Aporia that the pain that he was feeling was not despair but rather hope. Number 4. Jack vs. Carly. Now this duel was actually kinda heartbreaking. There was a developing relationship between the 2 characters, but went nowhere once season 2 hit. So this was actually a duel that I was like wondering what Jack was gonna do. Carly had some advantage with her fortune ladies, but then when Jack played the card Change of Destiny, Carly had the choice. Either deal damage to Jack and win the game, or recover life points, which of course would not kill Jack. Which I like because it still showed side of the regular Carly in there, and she was going to deal damage to her opponent, but then realizing that Jack might die, she decided to regain those life points instead. And then with the Earthbound Immortal turn, I like how Jack just stops it with Battle Fader, a mere level 1 monster. I just kind of find that funny. And then of course our Jesus Dragon brings out his power, which of course Jack summons the Majestic Dragon to summon Majestic Red Dragon, and could have pretty much finished the duel, but Jack hesitates for a moment and thinks about committing suicide instead of just Carly die alone, in which Carly, with the remaining amount of strength, decides to destroy herself along with the Earthbound Immortal, which of course brings up one of the best death scenes in the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise, with Carly confessing to Jack. So yeah, overall nice character development for Jack. Number 3. Yusei vs. Jack the Special. First off, a very slice of life duel. Yes, I know this one's not canon, but it was very entertaining nonetheless, and I think it's better than most of them in the show. like when both players play the trap card Assault Mode, at the same turn mind you, summoning their Assault Mode monsters, the clash between Red Dragon Archfiend and Stardust Dragon, the big clash between their Assault Mode monsters going all the way to space mind you, and then both players circling around each other to summon back their base form Ace monsters, with Yusei finishing the game with Stardust Dragon of course. Overall, a fun, entertaining duel that feels like a slice of life duel. And I really wish that this is the type of duel that happened in the tournament instead of the final duel in the tournament between Yusei and Jack from the first season. Number 2, Yusei vs Zone. So one of the things I really like about this duel is the fact that his other teammates were giving them their ace cards to Yusei, symbolizing that they want to fight together. And a pretty good excuse too. Yusei's runner is the only one that could fly, with magic anyway. And then the ways that Yusei has to overcome the Temporal Machine God's protection, summoning a bunch of Signer Dragons in one turn, and then of course dealing effect damage, because that's one way to get over the Temporal Machine Gods. Also with his face reveal, making him look like Yusei from the future. It's just too bad it isn't Yusei from the future, because that's what I would actually have liked. Instead, he's some scientist that made himself look like Yusei, and even copied his personality. We also get Zone's backstory on why he wants to destroy Neo Domino City, to make sure that future doesn't happen. And because we're talking about bonds of friendships here, when it looks like his opponent has the advantage of 5 Temporal Machine Gods that will no longer go back to the deck, Yusei of course will summon all the Signer Dragons, and of course bring out one of the most iconic moments in this duel, where he uses all the Signer Dragons other than his own to summon his ultimate form of his main ace monster, Shooting Quasar Dragon, which was amazing. Which of course turned things around, and then Zone turns things around again by summoning his ultimate monster, the ultimate Temporal Machine God Sephion, which lets him summon a bunch of Temporal Machine Gods with 4,000 attack each, and then Sephion gains the attack points equal to all the monsters on the field, so it becomes 20,000. And then Yusei using Cluster Wishes, which of course represents the hope of their future, to summon Stardust Dragon, and then uses all the other Signer Dragons' power together. And I also like it when Yusei would use something relating to their ace monsters. One of his teammates would also chant with him or declare an attack along with it. So we got Yusei's final attack against Zone, where the Signer Dragons through Stardust declares their final attack on the ultimate Temporal Machine Gods, and of course with protagonist tradition they use their main ace monster to finish the duel, with Yusei even trying to save Zone because that's what he promised. Now to honorable mentions, Ruka and Ruka vs Evac. Like I said before, it's nice to see other characters other than the main trio get some shine. Yusei, Jack, and Crow vs Godwin. The shenanigans between Sun Dragon and Moon Dragon, the Earthbound and Mortal, the cards that Crow and Jack left behind for Yusei, representing their bonds of friendship, and Jesus Star Dragon. Finally, Team 5D's vs Team Tile. Really like this duel mainly of Team Tile. They're poor and they actually use whatever resources they got. So they have a bunch of weak normal monsters in the deck, but play really well defensively against Team 5D's with their really rare cards in the show. And I also very like the dynamic between the two, considering that both of them have to grow up poor. Although Team 5D's actually grew up better as they actually got better living conditions as they grew up, while Team Tile is still down. But also the Sleeping Giant Thug, which of course Yusei has to summon Shooting Star Dragon, because to beat such a monster you have to of course summon your big ace. So overall, I like the dynamic between the two teams. And now to my number 1, Yusei vs Jack, the final duel of the series. Fancy synchro monsters, like the Warrior Synchros that Yusei used, Exploder Dragon Wing, and Crimson Blader that Jack summoned. And of course, because we have to have the clash between their ace monsters, Stardust versus Red Dragon Archfiend. But of course the big one is, of course, Shooting Star versus Red Nova, their evolved versions. And one thing I really like about this duel is that it's not Stardust Dragon, the main ace monster of the protagonist, that finishes the game. It's actually his second main ace monster, the very first synchro monster he summoned in the series, Junk Warrior, that finishes the game on Red Dragon Archfiend. And I also like the dynamic between Team 5D's on what they're gonna do in the future, which we already got hints in a prologue in an episode. So that's it for this top 10. Go ahead and tell me below which duels are your favorite. Probably one of my longest videos ever because it's a top 10, and there are a lot of details in the duels, so I had to do it. So go ahead and tell me yours, because I just told you mine. But of course, since we're going up the pecking order, our next one will be on Sexal. Which, oh boy, that one's way tougher than 5D's, I'm just gonna say that right now. But other than that, have a nice day.